Hello there, this is Colin Rennie here, and welcome to the 7th in a series of videos on Rhinoceros, Basic Modelling Introduction. Today we're going to do a session on creating solids using the Create Solid tools, and I'm also going to be showing you a little bit about the record history down here, and show you how that works in some simplifications of that, but it should show you enough to get you started using that tool there. The object we're going to be modelling today is going to be a boat, and the reason for that is because the boat is a sealed object. It needs to be a solid. It needs to be sealed for it to float, and it's quite a good analogy to work with. So, without further ado, I'm going to dive straight in. A boat is also a symmetrical object, so that's why I'm using the record history here. I'm going to show you how to create symmetrical objects and make adjustments from one side to the other on the fly, rather than having to continually copy and paste from one side to the other or mirror from one side to the other. So the first thing I'm going to do when creating any form of symmetrical object is, conventionally you need to, an extraneous square there, conventionally you need to start by a center line, creating a center line, and the center line is usually the X or the Y axis. It can be the Z axis as well, but today I'm going to use the X axis. So I'm going to start from the 0 point, 0 enter typed in, and I'm going to pick a point along my Z axis. I'm going to move that along, holding my shift key down to keep it on the Z axis, and that is going to create a center line. I'm now going to create one side of the boat here, so I'm going from the end, and I'm going to put 5 control points in, and I might edit those points just to make the boat a little bit more convincingly boat-like. So something like that would be okay. I might just move it around a little bit more. Yeah, happy with that. Okay, so that's one side of my boat. Now what I'm going to do is extrude that curve directly upwards to create a surface, an extruded surface. So I'm going to use the Extrude Straight tool here, which is this one, Extrude Straight, and that one's going to allow me to pull up, using perspective there, to pull up an extrusion here. Now that extrusion is defined in Rhino slightly differently to a standard surface. It's an extruded surface. If you notice, if I press explode here, you'll get a second curve appearing, and that is now a true surface, and it's a fully defined surface, which means it's slightly larger in the file size than the previous extrusion. The reason for that is so that Rhino can work with larger numbers of lighter objects like extrusions without having to continually turn them into full surfaces. So that's now a full surface. I've exploded it. Because it's a full surface, I can rebuild it using surface tools here, and this is rebuild surface. And I've got a count here of 10 on the U. I'm going to change that to 5, and I'm going to change that to 4 on the V. And it doesn't appear to have changed it particularly until I press the control points on the surface, and there are all the control points there. So now I have some maneuverability on this surface here. I can take control points and pull them around and change the shape of the object. What I'm going to do is to start by manipulating the back of this. I'm going to take the control points at the back, not this curve here. Take those control points, and I'm going to rotate them using this tool here, rotate. So I'm move my end point, and then I can rotate in 3-dimensional space, and the same with the front, with the bow of the boat. Now I'm going to rotate that in the opposite direction, so from the end here straight up, I'm going to go this way. The other thing I'm going to do with those points is to pull them over slightly, so that they're over this center line here. I might pull them down a little bit as well in that direction. So that's one side of my boat. I might want to give it a little bit of curvature, so that this currently is a simple curve. It's got a straight line going through it all the way through in one plane. So I'm going to make this curve in 2 planes. So I'm going to select these control points along here. I might pull these ones in first, actually. I'll pull these ones in first to create, oops, move those. Sometimes that can happen, and if you find you're snapping to sections that you don't really want to snap to, you can disable the snaps temporarily using this tool here, which will allow you to do something like that. So I can pull those ones in there. That one is probably a little bit too far out, so I might pull that one back like that slightly. Just move it back here. Yeah, that looks better. And I'm going to take these two here, and I'm going to move them in to give the boat some straightness there and a little bit of a lip. But that'll do fine. I mean, you can play around for as long as you like with these, really, to create some smooth curvature. But that is one side of my boat that I built there. So I'm trying to imagine what the other side's going to look like. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. Before I do that, though, I'm going to build the top and the bottom. So I'm going to start. Oops, turn this upside down. I'm going. Oops, flipping. There we go. The computer's running slightly slow because I'm using a different codec from normal to compress these. So it's a little bit slower than normal. I'm going to make a rectangular plane here. Now, the problem with, actually I'm not going to make a rectangular plane. The problem with a rectangular plane is that it's actually difficult to make a rectangular plane from the center. Here in rectangular plane, you've got corner to corner. There's no function here to produce a center plane. So I actually want to create a plane from the center because I'm trying to make a symmetrical object. So I'm going to use a rectangle first, and there is a tool in the rectangle tools, which is this one here, center, corner. And I can make my center 0, enter. And that allows me to create a rectangle that bounds that from one side to the other. I know it's going to bound the other side when I reflect it as well, and that's what I want. I can turn that into a surface fairly easily using the Surface from Planar Curves tool, and that's now a surface. I can take that one, copy and paste it, and then move it straight up. Holding my control key down here in perspective view allows me to move it up vertically in the construction plane. I'm also going to rotate this. The front of my boat is, just need to find that here. The front of my boat is this one here. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this plane here so that it goes down. I'm just going to zoom in slightly and move it up. There, that'll be fine. What I'm looking for here is intersection between all of these planes. So there's mine. Now I might want to give that a little bit of curvature. At the top of this form, a little bit of curvature. I could go to Surface Tools and rebuild this surface here. And 4 and 5 should be fine again. Now I can turn the control points on for that tool, for that surface. There they are. And I can grab these two here and move them straight up. Again, control will allow me to move those upwards, which gives the top of the boat a little bit of bow like that. I'm in shaded view. I might change this to ghosted, and ghosted is a nice view because it allows you to see through objects, to select objects through one or the other. So I can move this up like this. When I've done that, though, you can notice that I'm now not through this. So I might want to scale this upwards. You can do a one-dimensional scale here. From the end, I'll just use vertical. And that'll allow me to move that upwards there. I'm not modeling this with any degree of precision particularly. It's just a method to show you some ways. Now there's some interesting curvature going on there. Not entirely sure what's happened there. I might have to go back there. I made a mistake. Yeah, I pulled these guys too far over. So if we move them back, if I put my point on here, and I put S-track on, smart track on, I should be able to find a point to put these two. that should put them back to normal. So that should have that central line straight. That's correct. Okay, that's fine. Now, I also need a stern to my boat. This boat only has, it's only going to need 5 surfaces, but I'm going to need a back to this as well. So I'm going to use another planar curve. Actually, I'll use the rectangular technique again, using a 0 point here. And I'll make something around about that size. Turn it into a surface. There it is as a surface. I can take that surface, move it into position. It needs to be at the back of my boat, it needs to be here. And I'd also like to give it a little bit of angle, a little bit of rake. I don't really want it flat at the back now, that's a little bit dull. So there we are, that's it at the back. Now again, I'm looking here for intersection between my surface. I'm going to put it back to shaded, because it's actually easier to see if you've got full intersection. And I do there have full intersection. Okay, right, now that I've done that, I can now show you the record history tool. Record history allows you to record one object instance and any alterations that you make to that object when you copy it or rotate it with a copy, or do any other transform to it. It will carry over its alterations to all the iterations. It will carry over the alterations that you've made to all the iterations of all the objects. So it can be a very powerful tool, especially when you're trying to work quickly, or you want to make one change to one object rather than making the identical change to 100 objects. You can also allow it to change, for instance, lofts. You can change the curvature of a loft by changing the input curves rather than changing the loft itself. And so each time the curve, the loft surface is regenerated. For example, this one here, I'm going to use it here. So I'm going to press record history, and I'm going to take this curve here, and I'm going to mirror it. So mirror is a transform, and here it is here, mirror. And I'm going to mirror, I can mirror from 0, enter, that would be fine. And then shift to hold it to toggle it. There we go. And now, this object here has history. This object here is the master, so if I turn on the control points for that object, and for the sake of argument pull that one out, you'll see that it's reflected in the opposite side. So if you were to do that without history on, this one would change, but this one wouldn't. When you have the history recorded for that motion, for that alteration, that transform, it will carry over the action onto the other one, which can be a very, very powerful form of modeling. Right, so I've done that now. I'm just going to undo that move. I didn't really want to do that. Looking at the prow of my boat, it's a little bit messy. I think I might pull this point over a tiny bit. So I'm going to take that here and just squeeze it in like that. And that should be a bit better. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is take the base surface here and just move it up a fraction. And the reason for that is to ensure that I have full intersection in the bottom here. So I have intersecting surfaces all the way around my object. They will contain a volume now inside. There would be a volume inside there, and if all those are sealed, there's also no double volumes. I haven't trapped 2 volumes. I haven't got any figure of 8s where 2 volumes could confuse the tool. And I can now go ahead and create solid for this object here. So I'm just going to escape to get the control points off. I'm going to show you the solid tool here, and this one here is create solid, and it says select intersecting surfaces and polysurface to automatically trim and join into a closed polysurface. Delete input equals yes. So I'll leave delete input equals yes. I will select all the surfaces that I'm dealing with, which are these guys here, and I'll press enter, and it will build a surface, a closed polysurface from that there. That is that's a basic overview of it. Now I've now got a closed polysurface. I can explode it. It is separate surfaces, as we've learned before. So if I explode one side, you know it's hollow. But when it is a closed polysurface, when it is solid, if I go to properties here and details, I have a valid polysurface, closed solid polysurface with 5 surfaces. Okay, that is printable, 3D printable, and CNC millable. So it's a useful method to work with. And it gives you fairly quick automatic trims. I mean, you can do the same thing. It's a macro basically. You can do the same thing by trimming each edge one by one, selecting all the surfaces and then trimming one off the other one. using them all as cutting surfaces. But for this, it's much quicker. It does it all for you. It does the macro for you, and it leaves you with a fairly simple object behind, and gets rid of all the junk for you too. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that and learned something. The next video I'm going to show you is a bit about blending, so watch that, and I'll see you later. Cheers for now. Bye bye.